He will not force well, what I'm going to do is talk to you a bit about leadership. I was very bad at it in the beginning, as you will see as we go through. Interweave the things I've learned about my career and during my career. I will talk to you a bit about medicine, which of course is the area of STEM that I know best of all. I'll make one or two observations on other bits of STEM, but you probably know that better than I do. And then come back to the latter part of my career. Well, you can see much is written about leadership. I just had a look on Amazon, nearly 80,000 entries, books in English on this topic. And some people will say when they know it, when they see it. But remember, you can have a leadership moment. You don't always have to be the great leader. So you're all capable of leadership moments. So an ambition to be a leader doesn't have to be you're going to be the CEO of something. It can really be leading in a small way. There are lots of myths about leaders that we're born, not made, we're ready to lead others. Well, you'll see that my beginnings, nobody would have thought I would have led anything, quite frankly. As you will see, I come from a very working class family. My father one of 11, my mother one of 10, and no one had ever been to a grammar school, let alone a university. So, you know, I wasn't the material that leadership comes from. The fact that it's a lone genius, top of an organisation, most of the things where I've led, I've needed other people. And it has been in collaboration with other people. Maybe that's something about the way women lead, but that's certainly been true. Leaders must be charismatic extroverts. We all know that that is not true. We can think of leaders who are not necessarily extroverts, but do a great job. Formal authority, sometimes useful, but you can have formal authority and it still doesn't make you a leader. Anyone who's ever been a head of house of an Oxford or Cambridge college knows what that means in this context. You have no executive authority. We certainly don't in Cambridge, I'm sure you don't here, but you have to learn how to have an appropriate sort of leadership. So there are quite a lot of myths there. I took this from a recent report on women in science, and some of this is true. Students, and this was true when I was a medical student, can definitely be biased in their perception of leadership because it was at that time that we were mainly taught by men. And of course, if you look at medicine, more women go into general practice than into the hospital specialties. So that may still be true. And men often find it easier to deal with men as leaders, seeing them in their own image and finding them as potential equals. When I stood to become president of the Royal College of Physicians, we're nearly 500 years old. We've only ever had 2 women presidents. I was the second one. And when I stood, there were 10 people standing. I'm delighted to say 3 women. We've only ever had 6 women stand for that post, but we're about to vote. We've got another 3 women standing, which is very good news. But one of the officers of the college said to me, well, I have to tell you, Carol, I'm not going to vote for you. He said, we've had 1 woman. We really don't need another for 50 years. So he says, it's nothing to do with you, we just don't need another woman. When I got elected, he came and touched me on the shoulder and said, well, you know, I think you'll do quite an adequate job. He was not an officer of the college a year later. I hope some of you read Mary's lecture, The Public Voice of Women, which was given in January. If you haven't, Mary Beard, of course, is one of ours. She's a Newnham woman. You can't not have heard of Mary Beard. But she talks about the public voice of women and the way women's voices are not publicly heard, even in our own contemporary culture. And of course, she takes it from a sort of classic point of view, and she brings us up to the modern day and quoted there is the old Punch cartoon. That's an excellent suggestion, Miss Triggs. Perhaps one of the men would like to make it. And you know, is it the tone of our voice, the depth of our voice? Men's voices are deep, are ours rather high-pitched and perhaps somewhat whining. There's something about the voice of women as well as what we try to say. I asked Mary, and you must have a view on this, whether in supervision, you know, small group teaching in Cambridge, if it was a mixed small group, did the men speak more than the women? And were their voices heard more? She couldn't really quite answer that, but it's obviously a very interesting question, because in Cambridge, and I presume it's true in Oxford, women get into Cambridge with exactly the same sort of academic background as our men, but they do worse in the Tripos. This has been a 10-year, if you look back 10 years, except for 2 subjects, our women do worse than men. Now, what is it that happens along the way? Because they're no less bright. So, is it something about our voices and how we're heard? Well, I had a pretty shaky start. I come from a village in the middle of England, a place called Barwell, an industrial shoemaking village. Even when I was young, very much in decline. I imagine I scraped through the 11 plus. I went to a small grammar school in Market Bosworth, where the Battle of Bosworth was fought, and at school I was fat. I was so fat that my gym slip wouldn't pleat. You know, we had to wear gym slips in those days, a navy gym slip. Very much from a working class. I didn't play games because I really couldn't. So I was poor at games. And I came from a small village, a small primary school in the village. I wasn't as good as some of the city students who came from Leicester. Leicester was our nearest town, or city rather. But we had a fantastic headmaster. And he actually looked after his students, never married, a classicist, Oxford trained, but he made sure that you were able to go on. My parents couldn't have taken me out of school and made me work in the factories. I mean, they'd have had to have faced Mr. Gosling, and that was much worse than anything else. They were certainly not going to have to put up, you know, they were not going to do that. And so he enabled me to understand, as did the other teachers, that I could develop. And I suppose even then, in fact, I became head girl. I suppose I liked doing that sort of thing. I also learnt to be resilient early on. I'm not sure that I would advocate that you had to go the way I came to be resilient in losing my parents very early on. But it was a defining moment, and I do recommend resilience to you. It helps you very much go through life. I still can remember this evening when I went to bed and cried myself to sleep. It was a school weekend. I'd never been to London before. We were going to a school's conference. Hugely enjoyable. I travelled home exceedingly excited. Normally I was met at the bus station. I got the train to Leicester and then would take the bus into my village. But when I got home, I realised things were distinctly not okay. My mother, in fact, had had a severe hemorrhage, going into hospital. Nobody wanted to hear about the good things that had happened to me that weekend. I knew the world was about to change. It certainly did very rapidly. And I had to grow up really fairly quickly. But becoming resilient is crucial. You will not get all the jobs you want. You will have people put you down. I'm afraid you have to dust yourself down. Just get up and go on. The numerous jobs that I've applied for that I didn't get. There are many, I could tell you about them, but you just go on and apply for the next one. Well, I didn't get it right first time. I didn't read medicine to start with. I was in the sixth form for arts. I had a crush on the history master, quite frankly. I thought he was wonderful, and I went to Bristol to read history and read it exceedingly badly and disliked it intensely. I did very little work. I spent my time singing, which I loved, and singing with the special choir. I became head of my hall of residence, president of the student union. Amazing that I got a degree at all. And realized what I really wanted to do was to become a doctor. I knew then what I wanted, but I had no idea how to get there. I spent a year doing a diploma in medical social work because I didn't think anybody would want me as a medical student. I didn't really know how to make the change. I then went around the world and did voluntary service overseas. I got a place for medicine, had to give it up because I had no financial support. Went and taught in the Gilbert Nellis Islands, saved some money, came back, did first MB and got into medicine, is to condense what I did, and I did it again at my own university, which is Bristol. So at last I was in the subject I really wanted, and I just can't think of a better career than medicine, I have to tell you that. I mean, I found what I wanted to do, and a patient determined my choice of specialty, as well as my professor of medicine. My professor of medicine was a very blunt man. I went to him and said, I'm going to do your subject, I want to be a liver doctor. He said, no, Carol, you can't be a liver doctor. And I said, what do you mean I can't be a liver doctor? That's what I want to do. He said, no, you're too old. Now, I was 8 years older than everybody else because of all this messing around that I'd indulged in. And what he was saying to me, what he said to me, look, that particular specialty is full. If you want to get to the top, you want to be a physician, and you want to become a consultant, because in those days we had a very limited number of consultants. You had to wait for somebody more or less to retire or die prematurely for there to be a spot. There weren't a lot more jobs. He said, go away. You can come back and talk to me when you've looked at all the other medical specialties. Find one that isn't full, and then choose that. And you will find something in it which interests you. I did what he told me. I didn't want to do what he told me. I chose rheumatology, and by 1981 I had become a consultant rheumatologist. But I found a great career. He didn't know it when he sent me into that specialty. I found a disease called scleroderma. I do not expect you to have heard of it. It's rare, it's awful. It's a disease of women more than men. It kills you quickly if you get the worst form of it. But nobody looked after it in this country, and I was able to set up the National Service and start a very good laboratory for this disease. And when I finished in my clinical role, I handed over to a fantastic person who's continued my unit. And the struggle does still continue. It's a hugely obstinate disease that's given up its secrets very slowly. But if you go and look at the paintings of Paul Klee, you will see the history of scleroderma. It's a disease that turns you to leather. So you can't bend your hands anymore. You become exceedingly stiff, but it also stiffens your internal organs. That's the way it kills you. But it was a great career, and I was able to do a lot for patients. So although I didn't become a liver doctor, I did find a disease that I really liked. Just to give you the good news about medicine, because I know we know how difficult it is in some of the STEM subjects. I do believe meritocracy has been achieved at medical school. I can't give you a single report that provides independent evidence of systematic bias, of barriers against women's advancement in the profession up to a certain level. But that level's quite high. And women can go into any one of the specialties, and there's some 65 now. And to get yourself to a consultant level, which would have been a very high position a few years ago, is open to women just as much as men. And indeed, if you want to become a partner in a GP practice, that would be the equivalent. Again, that is open if that is something you wish to pursue. You may have to give up some things to get there. And I think compared to other STEM subjects, medicine is really doing pretty well. We retain women well in the medical profession. We've got an increasing number of subspecialties, some of which women have really liked. We have a common pay scale. Now, women say they don't earn as much as men. That is often because, particularly if they're part-time, they may not be as eligible as early on for the extra awards which medicine gives. So I can see that they can say, well, I don't actually earn as much as men, but we do start with a common pay scale. So I think on those measures, UK medicine offers a good career for women in comparison with other leading professions. But we tend to choose the more people-orientated specialties, which I think is quite interesting. Think about medical specialties. There are some that are more people-orientated and more plannable, so general practice, paediatrics, psychiatry, public health. Some more unpredictable and unplannable. You can see the low percentage of women. This is 2007 data, actually. It was from the Royal College of Physicians Working Party on women in medicine. So you can see where women tend to cluster, but that again is choice. Nobody is saying you must be up there. That is thinking about the lifestyle you may want. We've seen many more women go into general practice. I just want to put a sort of warning caveat here. This is a report by Penny Newman. More and more women going into general practice, many of them choosing part-time, and many of them choosing sessional GP contracts. You can never get to the top of general practice if you do that. I mean, we might as well get down to some fairly basics. You want to sit on the clinical commissioning board. If you want to be given the jobs on the committees, a sessional job, and where you perhaps move around and do different contracts, is no way to get to the top. And so I think some people would tell me, you know, oh, Carol, you can get through that. But if you look at it, then if you want to get to right to the top, I'm afraid there are some things that it will be necessary to do. And it's this thing about what is beyond the idea when you've chosen your subject, whether it's more technically orientated or more plannable. What are the leadership dimensions that you're going to have to look at and be prepared to invest in? If you want one of the 200 top jobs in medicine, you're going to hear Sally this afternoon, then you've got to pursue those career goals with a high degree of single-mindedness. And you'll hear a woman who has indeed done that. And if you're a doctor, I feel very strongly about my profession that if I'm going to do one of those jobs, as I did at the College of Physicians, I am a steward for my profession. I'm not just there getting a job. It is a stewardship contribution, and I'm afraid it means I'm going to have to give a bit more. I may not get to the opera, or I may not get to do something I wanted to do. There will be a requirement of me to make that stewardship contribution, which previously had been made by our male colleagues. But if we want those jobs, I'm afraid the stewardship contribution has to be made. And women choose. Quite a lot of women choose not to do that. That's okay. We don't need everybody to do this. But if you actually do want to do it, then you will need, I believe, encouragement and support. There will be humps, but it's entirely possible to do it. So I think some trade-offs must be made. I mentor 5 women doctors, and I think my greatest contribution to that mentoring is twofold. I get them over the humps when, you know, they say, can't go on anymore, Carol, it's the children, it's home, it's all my other responsibilities. I'm not going to apply for this job. My job is to steady them and get them on to the next bit. And they say, oh, I only tick 3 boxes, not 8 of the 10. And I'm not going to apply. I always say no man would have ever been put off. So if you want it, have a go. If you don't get it, it's not the end of the world. You can pick yourself up. So part of my job for these young women is to boost their self-confidence, make them believe they can do it, and be there in a rather simple sense to hold their hands while they go over the humps. And then there may be months when they don't need me at all. and that is equally equally fine. So I think, oh, it's decided to stop on me, does it? We've just heard from Elizabeth about STEM careers, and she knows far more than I do about it, but it still is worrying that only 17% of STEM professors are female, and I've read in the last few weeks the Women in Scientific Careers, the Technology Committee, published in February, and I know you gave evidence to that committee. But I've been, interestingly, in the last 2 months, talking to our female engineers. We've got some good female engineers in Newnham, and I just looked back and looked at sort of really good role models, and you're going to hear Jocelyn later, so you've got a fantastic role model there. But 2 women I know who, if you think about when they were doing engineering, they were really in a male-dominated world. They were absolutely, one in civil engineering, another in mechanical engineering. But Jo Kennedy is one of the best project managers that Arups have ever had, and has just done wonderful things and managed huge projects, and as the senior project manager, and recently the first woman of engineering in 2013. And Anne is about to become the president of the Royal Academy of Engineering, if she hasn't already taken it on. So there are women who must have fought perhaps an even harder battle all those years ago, that I think are fantastic role models. Now, this is what slightly worried me in the last 2 months of talking to Alice, who's in the department, civil engineer, a fellow of Newnham College, and she was discussing with me the research that she had done. And she said to me, and you may disagree with this, I hope you could, she said, we don't stay in civil engineering, we leave it. We qualify well, we're very highly qualified, we're paid less. And she said, on the whole, she felt from the research that she'd done that women in civil engineering were more likely to leave mid-career and were perhaps less satisfied with their jobs. Be really interested to know whether you have any views on that. One of the things she said, it's so often because you feel lonely on the site, you're often the only woman. Now again, this is not true in my own world of medicine. I'm not sure how much that matters in civil engineering. This is not in a stem cell subject, but quite a lot of women who do STEM subjects go into the civil service, so they're not excluded, of course, from the civil service. This is information from Sue Owen, who's the Perm Sec in Culture, Media and Sport. The interesting thing there for me, comparing it with medicine, is women start to fall off much earlier than they do in medicine. So the yellow are the women, 2006 and 2008, the blue are the men. And instead of getting further up that career structure, they are dipping before what would be the equivalent of a consultant level in medicine. And that, of course, so she says the shortfall starts further back in the pipeline. So their job is building that pipeline of internal women ready for the senior civil service. And how do you get progression of internal women rather than women who are already very well established coming in from the outside? She said it was a combination of self-help and holding to account. She stressed 2 things to me. Getting women to get senior experience. The equivalent I can think of is when I was a consultant with a very active clinical practice, it was always the women who did the extra clinic. The men went off to the region, to the committees, or they went up to the Department of Health. It was the women who stood at home, and so to speak, and did the patient care, whereas off the men went, could write that on their CV. I couldn't really write, this week I've done 2 extra clinics. What was that going to mean when I went for my next job? Wasn't going to mean much at all. So this business of getting women into other roles, getting them to stretch themselves. And one of the things she said, which I thought was very interesting, she said, when women come back into the civil service after maternity leave, if they're in my department, I don't want them to go and take the easy roles. I want them to stretch themselves. So I thought that was really very interesting. So lessons learnt so far, good help. You don't have to get it right at the beginning. It's okay to make some mistakes. You can't get a position you never applied for. That's quite impossible. Don't tick every box, it's okay. And you can recover from a setback. So just finally a few slides on what did I do after doing my clinical medicine in scleroderma. Again, this is a thing that took me a long while before I applied for something. I kept waiting for people to ask me, which really was a silly thing. The hospital approached me about being medical director, and when I said, well, no, I don't know anything about management, I've never been trained, they said, well, we'll train you, Carol, and you run a fantastic department. So I went and I became medical director. I learnt about a lot of things, exceedingly valuable, about sitting on boards. I would not be sitting on the board of the National Portrait Gallery now if I hadn't had this experience. So I learned how to be a good board member, and that has stood me very well as I've gone through life. So really important to do that. The Royal College of Physicians, well, I certainly had given lectures for them, but my involvement arose by accident. I wrote to the then president and said I didn't like paying my £400 membership fee. I didn't like what the college did. I thought it was old-fashioned and a dinosaur, and I thought my £400 was wasted. He said, come and change it. So they elected me into the council. Eventually they elected me as their president. And at my first council meeting, there were only 3 women, I think 17 men. That was a very good learning experience. And I went on then to be elected to chair all the medical royal colleges. That's where I have the scars on my back. Trying to get 21 organisations, including, the College of Surgeons, both of England and Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh have colleges. They all think they know what to do. None of them really want to give in to the other colleges. And I had to learn leadership lay in my ability to persuade, cajole, and align forces. And then I could get them to do things together. And we did manage to get the ear of government and attract funding. One important thing, and I said it right at the beginning, I'll stress it, leadership may be episodic, and this is a very good example of it. I tried and failed to set up a faculty of medical leadership and management when I was at the college. I knew it was needed. I just couldn't get the ducks in the row before I had to step down. I did get started on an MSc in medical leadership for the college, and that has now reached fruition. But then when I went to the academy, although I wasn't the chair of the academy when it was actually founded, I did the groundwork that got us eventually a faculty of medical management. So you can have leadership moments, and you sometimes have to do something, go away, and then come back. But the final part really of my health work is ongoing. I advise the government on health and work. It was a light bulb moment. I'm not an occupational physician. I know nothing really about business, and I've learnt and worked in a very different environment. Great opportunity. I've done 2 independent reviews for government. This one led to the sick note being changed in law to the fit note. Great people to work with. And I learnt how to give an honest and independent advice, how to build trust of ministers and respect. And I learnt never to let anyone know what my political views were. And it was a huge area of learning and expertise. And now I really am privileged. I didn't have the benefit of an Oxbridge education. And I am now getting it at such a late stage in my life, and I love it. And I really love the women, both the undergraduates and the graduates that we have in the college. And for me, my mission is, and my vision is, I want these women to go there develop their potential and self-confidence. And I want them to leave with aspiration and an ambition for leadership. That's really what I'm about in Cambridge. Leave you with a final thought. I didn't want to get to the age of 50 and beyond and think, oh, I'm a what-if person, that I'd never really happened, I hadn't made a difference. And I read in a book many years ago the next quote, that if you only think that's all that's possible is just a canoe, it's the only a possibility in all that's real, or the only thing you can ever imagine, you will never see the ship that goes on the ocean, and then you'll never feel the wind blow. So go beyond those canoes, feel the wind blow and see the ship. And as I said, I cannot tell you how many posts I applied for and did not get, but don't miss applying. Thank you.